thing, and I'll, yep, there you go. And I'll talk closer into it.
And if you have a question, let me bring the mic to you. So
Yeah.
we can have that on the recording, please.
So I'm grateful to be here. I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak to you, and I hope by the time we're done with this meeting, if we want to call it that, we'll be comfortable enough with each other to have been able to express our concerns and thoughts, and I plan on being able to answer any question that you have to me, whether it's about policy, about my life, about really anything, about what I believe. I always say that other than something that's intimate between my wife and I'll answer any question, And so think about the questions, and as I go, I'm going to go through a few things here that I hope that will be enlightening to you, and then we'll get into some questions here. So I too have Googled my name, and I look at it and go, man, who is this guy? I mean, I don't like him very much, you know. And I don't know what to call me either. I don't know. Google says I'm a militant. I really don't know what that means. It seems like anything to do with the government they call military, and anything that's not to do with the government they call militant. I don't really know, what they're meaning exactly on that. But hopefully by the time we get through this, at least what I have to say to you, that you'll be able to draw your own conclusions of who I am and what I'm about. Before moving on, though, I want to try to lay a foundation. But I need to ask, how many people have heard me speak before? Okay, so maybe a fifth of you, looks like. So most of you haven't. And so if you've heard me speak before, maybe you'll hear me say a few things. Hopefully it's not the exact same thing. But you'll understand what at least somewhat of what I'm doing here. Because I want to ask the question and lay a foundation before we move forward. And hopefully we can somewhat all agree upon this. And then moving forward is going to help us out with the rest of this. I want to ask the question, what is liberty? And I have to admit that, like, I believed I knew about it. I know what it feels like. I know what the opposite of it is as well. But it wasn't until I was put into some very dire circumstances that I began to really try to define liberty. And I had to admit before that I really didn't know what it meant. I really couldn't define it. So I want to define that, what liberty is here. And does anybody want to take a shot at it? Don't worry, if you don't know exactly. I just admitted that until I was in some pretty dire circumstances, I didn't know what it meant. Go ahead.
Well, to me it means the freedom to choose.
Okay.
Primarily, and you need to make those wise choices.
Yeah, but to be free to make those choices. Okay, I would agree with that. Anybody else? We have to have more. I mean, what is liberty? We sing about it. We sing the national anthem. We send our, young men and women to go to war to defend it. This is the idea of it. We have we pay our taxes in the belief that we're getting liberty for that. At least we used to, right? This liberty is quite important to us. It's threaded all throughout our society, rightfully so. It's what this nation was founded upon. And so I want to try to get to the bottom of this. Like, what is liberty?
Liberty is, Heavenly Father gave us liberty, like Solomon, to choose, make choices. Those choices need to be limited to what it doesn't interfere with somebody else's life, liberty, or property. But we should have choices to do what affects us.
Okay, I think we're getting somewhere. So it's a gift from God, from our Heavenly Father, to be able to choose And that, but there's some limits on it, right? You can't use it to infringe somebody else's rights, right? That's really good. Yes.
Even I think liberty is the freedom of thought and movement.
Okay. To be able to,
That's what it is to me.
I would have to agree with that. Okay, so I'm going to give you the definition because I too contemplated all these things, and none of the comments that I've heard here I would disagree with. I think they apply to this definition. But I began to, just try to define it. And I'm not certainly the originator of this, although my thoughts came originally to me, and then I realized that a whole bunch of other people have said the exact same thing. And that is that liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. So does anybody have, one is thoughts on this, or is a disagreement with this? Because I really want to be able to move forward somewhat, at least somewhat agreeing with this.
I think it is an ability, but I think it's also
A responsibility to act in accordance with correct principles that will protect those laws for future people to have the same access to freedom.
Okay, so there's certainly responsibility, and part of that is to not use it to infringe upon somebody else's rights. And I do hear what you're saying. Just to give you a little bit of authority behind this definition, and I found these way later. This one is from Thomas Paine, and he says, liberty is the power to do everything that does not interfere with the rights of others. Sound familiar? It's pretty close, right? Thus, the exercise of the natural rights of every individual has no limits, save those that assure to other members of society the enjoyment of the same rights. It's just a lot more eloquent, right? So, Thomas Jefferson, this is I think, very similar as well. Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. Right? He's pretty much saying the same thing. And then I love this. I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individuals. So he's separating that. Liberty is not always what the law is meaning or what the law is putting forth. Sometimes the law becomes the tyrant's will, right? So he's separating, but it's very clear. It's the unobstructed action according to our will within the limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. Or, as I put it, liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. Now, let's apply this a little bit. Let's think just a little bit deeper before I get into what I really want to show you here. So let's just think about this. We're going to take these definitions and we're going to apply them to real life. So the freedom to worship, right? To be able to worship whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. Do we believe that a person should be able to choose to believe whatever he wants as long as he's not infringing upon another person's rights? It doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be your salvation. That's going to be salvation, right? I mean, but freedom is the ability to be able and protect that right. Again, it doesn't mean that worshiping a yellow dog is going to bring you salvation. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, but if a person wants and chooses to worship a yellow dog, the laws and the land should protect that right, and then God gets to take care of the rest, right? Go ahead.
Unless the coronavirus is available.
What's that?
Unless the coronavirus.
That's the coronavirus, yeah. Yeah, that changed everything, right? All those things went out the door. Okay, so we're applying this. So freedom to property, to be able to do whatever you want with your property as long as you're not infringing on your neighbor's rights. Are we losing that right? That freedom? We are. Every little municipality and county and the state, everybody's infringing upon that right. We're losing that, and it's becoming more and more stringent, right? To be able to do whatever you want with your property as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Do we believe that or not? Because there's a lot of people that don't believe that. I've come face to face with them many, many times. So the freedom to publish your thoughts, to be able to say whatever you want or publish whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's right. The freedom to travel, the freedom to trade. I like this. I'm an entrepreneur, so I like my freedom to trade. I want to, as long as it's a willing buyer and a willing seller, they're adults and they agree, then they should be able to trade whatever they want, however they want. As long as, but I can't go and steal something and then trade it. That's not freedom, right? Or I can't force somebody to trade with me. That's not freedom. So those are the limitations, right? Those are the limitations that keep us all free. They're not really limitations. They're just making sure that everybody has freedom, right? So freedom to educate your child, freedom to speak out. Some of these are protected in the Constitution. Others aren't. They all are, but they're not listed. But that is freedom. Go ahead. Yeah. So each man or woman should be able to do whatever he or she wants as long as they do not infringe upon another person's rights. So can we at least generally agree on that and move forward with that understanding? Because it's so important that we understand this, because then we can start identifying the loss of freedom and also identifying those who are taking it. Just like the freedom to control, own, and control property, right? Well, if we define that freedom is the ability to do whatever you want with your property as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights, then all of a sudden it's very clear of who's infringing upon those rights, right? And so that's where we need to be so that we can be proactive in securing our most precious, one of the most precious gifts that our Heavenly Father gave us, which is the liberty to choose and to all these things, act. Okay? Of course, the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So in our most founding documents, we see that it identifies this, that is a gift, and it is a right to be free, to have liberty. So with that, I don't know if we can turn the lights down a little bit. I want you to watch a video here.
The main one is better.
Idaho, to me, represents the best of what America was. Idaho was a conservative state with traditional family values, full of people of faith who carried guns, loved the Constitution, helped each other, and built businesses by the sweat of their own brow. Idaho is sliding down the path and ceasing to be the Idaho that we love. I don't want that to happen. And so I'm announcing now that I will be running as governor for the great state of Idaho. As governor, I will be implementing a plan and a platform to keep Idaho, Idaho. The Keep Idaho, Idaho plan will improve life, bring prosperity, empower and protect families, and secure the opportunity for happiness to every person living within the beautiful state of Idaho. I know how to win. My record and history demonstrates that I'm willing to fight to the very end. Now it's your choice. May God bless the people of Idaho. May we live up to these blessings. May we keep Idaho a bastion of freedom and prosperity for years to come. May we be an example to the world of how to be free, of how to act, how to treat each other. And together, all of us together, may we keep Idaho, Idaho. Thank you, my friends. Thank you. What do you say? Should we keep Idaho, Idaho? I think it's worth it. I think it's worth fighting for. I think Idaho is worth preserving. And I ask the question all the time, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go if we lose Idaho? We'll talk about that a little bit. I do want to give you a little bit of background on who I am, just so you know what makes me tick, a little bit about, where I came from. Obviously, knowing that is going to help you decide whether you can support me or not. So I was raised on the Bundy Ranch in southern Nevada. It's a very dry, arid place. These are my parents, Cliven and Carol Bundy. And I'm grateful to be raised by good people who taught me right from wrong, who taught me when to compromise and when not to compromise. Because I believe, as they taught me, that there is a time when you're supposed to give, and give a little bit, and there's a time when you're not. And so I'm grateful for that, among many other things that I learned from them. And just so you know, my mother is from Gooding, Idaho. So, yeah.
Where did they meet?
They met, good question.
Stumped you right off.
Yeah.
You can come back.
Okay, I'll come back to that one. Gotta think about it for a little bit. I mean, I know where I met my wife.
Okay.
Thank goodness. All right. So here's a picture of the Bundy Ranch there. You can see it's quite arid. There's not a lot of vegetation. And my father runs cattle on that range. It takes about 100 acres to produce enough feed for one cow. And there's little artesian springs, they're very small, that are riddled throughout the foothills. And so they've went in there and captured that water, and it'll come out like just a trickle, but it's very consistent. In fact, there's a water we call a rabbit, and it drops into a concrete tank. And I asked my father several years ago, so I was probably, just turned 40 or so, and I asked him if he's ever seen that run any more or any smaller, and he said no. He's never seen it run less or more in his entire life. I've never seen it my entire life. So there's a consistency there, even though it's very arid, very dry, but there's consistency there in the water that allows us to ranch there. Now, here's my dad on a horse, and you see one of our bulls. You can see there's some hair on the end of his horn, so he probably just got done hooking the horse or something. This is my little brother, but I grew up doing this. This is what I grew up doing. You'll notice the stockade corrals. Those are cedar post corrals, and they're some of the only corrals that hold up in that dry weather. Unless it's like a metal corral. And some of these corrals, not this one, but some of the stockade corrals in that area are pushing 100 years old. And they're still there. We still maintain them today. This is my little sister getting off the bus. She now has like 4 kids, but this is her getting off the bus when she was younger. She's met with four dogs and a calf. That calf, actually, my father saved that calf. His mother was hit on the highway, and he shows up there, and she was not going to make it, and so he did an emergency C-section and saved that calf, and we bottle fed it. And it was ended up being a really nice bull, but it was very strange because ever since it was just coming to this life, it was a pet, and then there was always dogs and animals and sheep, and so he would go lay in the middle of the field right there, not very far from the house, and all the dogs and all the sheep, and they were all in one big pile. And I just say they were having an identity crisis. So anyway, we were the first to get on the bus and the last to get off. We spent about an hour going to school and an hour coming back. So I spent a lot of bus time. There was a lot of mischief that went on the bus.
Where were you in the lineup?
I'm right in the middle of the older group, so yeah. I'm fourth down, and so my older sister, she's 5 years older than me, so that's I was right in the middle of them. I did. Well, I have to say that when I was probably 15 or so, my father came to me and said that the ranch wasn't big enough for the both of us, and it wasn't because he was mad at me or whatever. Although we certainly had our knockdown dragouts, as we call them, on the ranch, but we always worked it out. We always had we always ended up forgiving each other, and it wasn't just me. I have 6 brothers, so But he came to me and said the ranch wasn't big enough for the both of us. And he was ultimately just telling me while I was a young man that the ranch just doesn't produce enough living for more than a couple families. And he has a lot of kids. My dad had a lot of kids, and I was going to have to go and most likely make a living somewhere else. And that was difficult. But I knew I was most likely going to have to do that, and then I've had to do that. But before, I did serve a mission in Minnesota, and I was extremely grateful for that time. It was a refinement for me. I came off the ranch and I was really free, and we were just almost like river rats, and just spent a ton of time on the ranch, and we really loved it. We didn't even care to go to town much. And then I go on a mission, and which I loved and had no problem going on a mission, but it refined me. It allowed me to be able to, wear a suit and a white shirt and a tie and talk to people and represent the church and the Lord. And I'm grateful for that time. It's a sacred time for me. I will say that I left there committed that whatever I did, I would do for the Lord. That I would not pursue anything without me believing or feeling and understanding that the Lord wanted me to do this. And so that's how I've tried to conduct my life. I haven't been perfect, but that is how I have tried to conduct my life. And I'm grateful for that time and for the testimony of the Lord that I have. After my mission, I went to a little bit of college at Southern Utah University and got into business management there. And I started a little business, and kept wondering, well, why am I in Cedar City, Utah? Because my business would have done better somewhere else. And I kept staying there wondering, why am I supposed to be here? But never felt like I could leave. And finally, after some time, I found out why. Because I was waiting for my wife. She finally came along, and I scooped her up and convinced her to marry me, and we got married, and just a few months later we moved. We moved down to closer to Phoenix, Arizona, where we started a life there, and I continued in my business, and I built one of the largest fleet maintenance businesses in the Phoenix, Arizona, in the Mojave Desert area. And so, why do I tell you that? Because I want you to know, I started this from scratch. It was nothing when I started. I built it up, and I hired hundreds of people, dealt with millions of dollars a year in annual budgets, and have had to build processes and develop these things in my business. And I ran this for 21 years before I sold it. And so you could know that I have a CEO background. I have an entrepreneur background. I have done these things, and many of the skills that I developed and learned through this period of time will be required for me to know as a governor. Now, that wasn't all, because when I was in business about 16 years, I could see that this industry, this commercial fleet maintenance industry, was very in need of technology. It just was a need of technology. There was no software that was really developed for this industry. And so, like my dad says, when you don't have a job, in America you make one. Well, in this case, we didn't have a software, and so we made one. I got a team together, and it took us almost 4 years. Spent a bunch of money on it, and I developed it with my customers, my technicians, my office staff, my vendors, and we all did this together. I'm going to have to hang on to this a little different here. And we developed this software for this industry, again, from scratch. And we implemented the things we learned in the shop to this software, and it worked so well in our shop that we began to sell it to other shops. And now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. So,
Sorry about the
It's mine, actually. We've been saying we need to replace this thing for a while now. Wendy, put it on your to-do list. My wife is from Murray, Utah. So,
Why
little,
did you go down to Phoenix? What took you down to Phoenix?
well, I had my business already, and it was commercial trucks, and so I had to go where there were trucks. And you know, the little fleets in southern Utah just weren't really enough to make a living, although I was glad to have them at the time. They got me through a little bit of school, but it wasn't enough to build on. And so, I mean, anybody who's been in Phoenix, Arizona, know there's clear full of trucks. And we lived outside of Phoenix in a little town called Levine, but my shop was actually right in Phoenix. And like I said, I built one of the largest private fleet maintenance companies in the area. So that's, again, some of my background. So I have a tech background. You never know that, right? Google doesn't tell you that. Doesn't tell you much about it. And since then, I have sold both those businesses. I sold my shop, and I sold my fleet maintenance software, and I moved to Emmett, and I used that money that I made to buy commercial buildings like this, and then I rent it out and lease it out to businesses and even convention areas just like this. So that was my life. That's a little bit about my background as far as where I was at. And now I have to admit that during this period of time when I was kind of at the height of my business, like, life was really, really good. It was the first time that I had both time and money. As you know, usually you either have time and no money, or you have money and no time, right? Well, it was the first time that I had a little bit of both. And I began to, feel blessed and ask the Lord what He wanted me to do with my time and my money. And then an incident happened to my family in 2014 that some of you may be aware of. And I couldn't believe what I saw. Because ultimately, to make a very, very long story short, the federal government, mostly the Bureau of Land Management, came after my family. And what was happening was Harry Reid, who was the Senate Majority Leader, I think at the time, I know he was during most of the time, well, he had made a deal with a Chinese corporation to come in and create the largest solar farm in the world, not just the United States, in the world. And it was going to take up, I believe tens of thousands of acres. I don't know exactly how much, but it was massive, massive. And it was only 80 miles from our ranch. Well, the environmentalists, of course, they get involved, and they say, well, you're going to have this solar farm. You got to have a place for all the wildlife to go. And so they designated the Bundy Ranch as the mitigation area for the desert tortoise. And they said, you can no longer ranch there. Well, the problem with that was, not only there's constitutional problems, major constitutional problems, but the problem is my dad had deeds to the grazing deeded with the state of Nevada. They were tied to the water rights, and they were deeds. They were real property, just like your home. Just like, they were free and clear. My dad had either purchased them from other ranchers or inherited them. And they were deeded with the state of Nevada clear back prior to 1890. And so he's saying, you're telling me that the land belongs to you, talking to the Bureau of Land Management. And so therefore you can tell me whether I can graze on it, can't graze on it, and all of that. But I have deeds with the state of Nevada that are grazing rights. And then then when you get it in it constitutionally, you see that there is no authority for the federal government to control mass amounts of land inside an enabled state. And so all these battles went on, and it went back and forth for about 20 years. And then in 2014, during the Obama reign, they thought they had enough political power and enough force to come down upon my family. And they sent 213 armed federal agents and surrounded my family's ranch, surrounded the ranch home, put snipers on the hills, threatened us, helicopters, there's 4 helicopters, MRAPs, guards, and they locked up the whole ranch. And then they began destroying our water infrastructure, which they knew that was the lifeblood of our ranch, and knew that that's where our rights were tied to. They began to destroy the corrals. They began to shoot the cattle from helicopters and bury them in mass graves. And then they built this, wish I had a picture of it, I need to get one. They built this area that was like a corral made out of that construction orange mesh. And they said that this was your First Amendment right area. The only place that you can protest or demonstrate what we're doing here at the ranch, you have to do in this area. They call it the First Amendment area. Well, we refused to be corralled up there. And so because we were, just standing and demonstrating and just, I don't know, some people were signs and other people were just verbally on the side of the roads, they began to sick their dogs on us, throw us to the ground, tase us. They began to arrest us and do all of these things. And but it was filmed. People filmed it, and it went all over the United States, all over the world, actually. And people in this country were not okay with that. They were not okay with what their government was doing. So hundreds and eventually thousands of people came to the ranch. And of course, I was one of them that came to the ranch and to help my dad and try to be a spokesman for him and do the best we could. We're just a little family. And ultimately what happened is so many people showed up, and the federal government just lost the PR battle, which is quite a story. And the people demanded that they give the cattle back, the ones that they had taken and put in corrals. And ultimately the federal government decided they're going to give the cattle back and leave the area. And I watched them leave the area in less than an hour in 107 vehicles, one back behind another. And they did this because they were afraid. In fact, I'll show you a little picture. I should probably document this a little more better for you, but I think I got it here. Yeah, right here. So here's you see this? This is only about a third or a fourth of the way through the convoy. You can only see probably a fourth of the convoy, because you see where the freeway is? The convoy went all the way up to the freeway, and they were leaving. That's why the freeway is backed up, one of the reasons. And this is what I saw the American people do when they come together. And they said, no more. You're not going to do this anymore. I saw this military type operation that was put together to destroy my family and my family's rights. I saw it turn completely right side up. And I saw them leave, and they never did ever come back. In fact, my father just visited here last weekend, and he says he has never seen a marked Bureau of Land Management vehicle on the ranch since that day.
Wow.
Now, so there's probably no doubt that there's some unmarked ones, and but he has never seen a marked Bureau of Land Management vehicle on the ranch since that day, and it's been over 8 years, I'll answer your questions in a little bit.
This is another question I just want to say really quick. BLM, why do you think they had to change the name of it and get it associated with another group?
Well, they've been the BLM for a long, long time.
I know, but when somebody says BLM, who's going to think Bureau of Land Management?
Yeah, well, now, before they used to, but
Sorry to think
I don't mind fighting either one of them, so. Anyway, but this like turned my life and my whole family's life upside down. I mean, one is, I could not believe what I saw. It was like a scene out of the Hollywood movie Red Dawn. That was the best way. I mean, they had MRAMs and guards and helicopters, and they were guarding, and I mean, it was insane. They had a military type base, and I say type base because I don't want to insult the military. And so this is what I saw, and I could not believe that this was possible in the United States of America. And yet, it was something that seemed it was completely organized. They believed they had authority to do it, and it was something that they were going to push all the way to the end. In fact, we had a liaison that spoke to my older brother, because my dad wouldn't speak to him, and he said that if we resisted in any way, this would be another Waco or Ruby Ridge. And then in another statement, he says, they will kill you. We found out later that the they was the FBI HRT team, the special forces of the FBI, who were running this operation. So, so again, this flipped my, just turned my little comfortable life upside down. And I didn't quite know how to cope with it, in the sense that, we became, I'll just give you an example. We were constantly being, approached for interviews and documentaries and all of this nonstop. And give you a little bit of an example, my father, I remember him stepping outside of the church on a Sunday, steps outside of the church, because he had a network had scheduled for an interview. And he had his flip phone, and he's leaning up against the church wall, and he's doing this interview. And this network covered 28 countries and over 300 million people. And that's who he was speaking to. And so that completely changed our life. And then I moved to Idaho in 2001, and I was, to be honest with you, I was trying to flee. Or excuse me, 2000. This was in 2021, 2015. Thanks, Wendy. Keep me straight. So yeah, a little over 7 years ago, and I was, I'll be honest with you, I was trying to get away. I was trying to get kind of free, get my life back, and I also saw that I needed to be among a people that was going to stand up for each other. And I felt and believed that Idaho would be the best chance of that, because I knew what was coming. Now you know. But I knew 7, 8 years ago. I knew 8 years ago. Because the very same thing that they've been trying to do to us recently is what they tried to do to my family back then. So anyhow, and then that put me right next to, just over the border in Oregon, to another family, the Hammond family. You may have heard of them, but they are ranchers in eastern Oregon that were going under almost the very same thing that we went through. And but the federal government was trying to take their ranch, was using the prosecution tool, the courts, to do it. And ultimately, I stood for them because they were being to the point where they were going to put them in prison. And did put them in prison. And we fought for them. We went to the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, and we went in there and we got such media attention that we got international attention that ultimately President Trump pardoned these ranchers. And they went back home to their families, and were able to try to put their life back together. So I'm grateful for President Trump and what he did there. Now, let's, I'm going to play one more video, and then I want to talk about Idaho, because that's what everybody came to talk about. And then we're going to answer some questions. So. In early of 2015, my family and I moved to Idaho. We did not know what the Lord had in store for us, but we had hoped that it was a life of peace and tranquility in a beautiful little town with wonderful neighbors. And then 2020 came around. The governor of Idaho, Brad Little, forcing innocent people to lock down in their homes, threatening force if they go to church. I don't want that to happen. I want Idaho to remain Idaho, free, because we need Idaho to be free. We need to have at least one state in this country that is an example of safeguarding American principles and liberties. There is only one elected position that can peacefully turn the totalitarian direction of the state around. That position is governor. if the people will get behind a governor that will not compromise, a governor who will not yield, a governor who has been through the fire and knows how to win, then through that position, the house of government can be cleansed and the purpose of the state can be restored. For this reason, I am running for governor. So today, I will repent of my refusal to vote. I ask you to give it one more chance with me. And together, let's keep Idaho, Idaho. Together, with the strength of the Lord, I believe we can keep Idaho free. Thank you very much. And I still believe that. I still believe that. So let's talk about Idaho. Let's talk about where we're at. And I'm hoping that I can give you some insight. I'll warn you that it's not all good, but it's real. And we need to face what is happening here in Idaho. Because Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. And if you don't understand that yet, then you just don't understand what's happening in Idaho. So since 2015, approximately 248,000 people have moved into Idaho. Now, to kind of give you a perspective, that's equivalent to, that's over about 20,000 more than Boise. And they've moved in really, so it's like adding a city the size of Boise to our state every 10 years. So talk about a challenge, right? And to make matters worse, approximately 36% of the people moving to Idaho are liberal-minded. And they want desperately to change Idaho into a more progressively woke place to live. And they're active in this. And they have done this before. This is something that they have done, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Well, in fact, to the point where, here's just one example, that we have a homeless case that's gone all the way to the Supreme Court. You would think with the Republicans controlling both the House, the Senate, and the governor's office for the last almost 30 years, you would think that Idaho would be the most conservative state in the country, but it's not. So what's happening here? Why are we almost completely red, right, for almost 30 years, and yet we are not even putting forth the Republican platform? We're not becoming more conservative. We're not becoming more fiscally responsible. We're not becoming less limited government. We haven't taken care of the abortion issues. The list can go on and on. Why? We've had full control of our government. At least we've thought, the Republicans that we were sending, but they're not. They're not doing that.
There's too many Democrats.
What does that R stand for? Does that stand for an R or something else? Right? We're seeing this stuff. Go ahead.
A lot of the farmers and ranchers, people that produce the food for the world, are sending their things to China. They've got money coming. What I'm saying is, a lot of Idaho's industry, I've been here for almost 50 years now, but I'm from California. And so Idaho's industry bows to money, basically.
Okay.
Conservatives even,
So you're saying that our elected representatives are bought?
Yes.
Bought off?
Yes.
And so they don't,
No bow for money.
so they're not putting the conservative values or the Republican platform forward. They're putting whoever can influence them the most.
And the rest of your Republicans are complacent. They're followers, they're not leaders.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you some facts here.
They look
So
the other direction.
that is certainly a truth of what you're saying. I'm going to give you some a little other things to think about too. Because did you know that Governor Little, as a senator, was the only Idaho state representative to support gay marriage during the Proposition 8 movement. You knew that. You're one of the few that knew that. So think about that. As a senator, he was the only state representative, we're talking about Republicans and Democrats, to support gay marriage in the Proposition 8 movement.
Why they come here to Boise?
Okay?
I could say that, Governor Otter went to Nevada to campaign for Reed.
Yeah, for Harry Reid.
And who blew
Right. The Democrat Senate Majority Leader, our Republican governor, went to go campaign in Nevada for him. Okay? That's an interesting fact. So let's yeah, poor boy, right. So this is Little. So also, under Governor Little's leadership, Idaho has increased its food stamps program by 24.2%, more than any other state in the United States. Also, Governor Little just signed a bill to implement $50 million of COVID relief funds for free government housing.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, why is this important? Why is this important for you to know? Because state housing, government welfare, free food, free health care, and pushing the gay ideology has been the staple of the liberal agenda for many, many decades. And no person has pushed that agenda more in Idaho than Governor Brad Little.
Yeah.
So, but yet we keep voting. He was a senator. He was voted in as a senator. I don't know what he did before that. I don't know if he's part of the House or not. I know he's a senator. Then he became the Senate Pro Tem. Then he became the lieutenant governor. Then now he's the governor. So all this time, he's never changed his views or beliefs, but all of us, I mean, I don't want to say all of us, but we keep voting for him. You got a comment?
Well, it's very simple. It's just like Adolf Hitler or Obama. They used the young generation to vote. So if you threw candy at them, such as free this, free that, they're going to vote for him. And so those are the majority. And if you get them to vote for it, you can get in.
Okay, but I don't think we need to sell out the youth. I think you're right, but believe me, more than just the young people voted for Brad Little and Scott Bedke and keep voting for him. And why? Because they march down there and think they're doing their civic duty by voting R at the voting booth. And they don't pay attention to anything that's happening in our state. And it is very dangerous to our liberties. It is what is destroying this country. Now, don't get me wrong, they're destroying it, but we are allowing them to the point where we're almost past the point of being able to act where we're acted upon. Okay? Go ahead.
That's how Colorado went.
That's right.
Colorado was red. And they brought people
That's
like
right.
Little, Becky, and all those there. And over time, now they're Democrat.
That's right. But let's not only Colorado, Washington was that way. Oregon was that way. California was that way. Nevada was that way. New Mexico was that way. Colorado, again. And that is exactly where we're at right now in Idaho. That is where we're at. We're on the verge of, are we going to be controlled by the leftist liberal agenda? Because the rhinos, the people that we keep voting for us, are taking us right into that. Now, I'm going to have to ask to let me get through this, and then I promise we're going to have lots of conversation. But if not, it's going to take too long, and then I'll be like, oh, I took up all the time. So I'm just going to run through this because there's some facts I want to lay out, and then any comments or questions, we're going to talk about this because I like that we're getting this going. This is what we want. So now, if that was all I had to tell you, it's concerning and it's something that we have to do. But if that was all I had to tell you about Idaho, I'd be pretty happy at this moment. Because Idaho is not only the fastest growing state in the United States with the most increase in welfare programs, but it also was the first in a few more things. Idaho was the first state to arrest people for for attending church, to arrest pastors for having church outside during COVID. Very first state. Now, we talked, yeah, it is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And I'm going to emphasize it a little bit. If we go to the First Amendment, right? Remember, the founders would not sign, wouldn't agree and sign to the Constitution without the amendments being, the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights being added to it. And the very first line of the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And yet Idaho was the first state during the whole COVID garbage to arrest pastors for organizing church in Idaho. Now, to emphasize a little bit more here, I've got the Idaho Constitution. And it says, Article 1, it's called Declaration of Rights, Section 4, Guarantee of Religious Liberties. It sounds really good, right? The exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on account of his religious opinions. Seems pretty clear, right? It's against the law to infringe upon somebody's right to worship. Now, let's go to one of the last sections, section 19 of the Constitution. And it says, it's called Religious Freedom Guaranteed. I don't know why they added another section, but it is beautiful writing. It says, it is ordained by the state of Idaho that perfect toleration of religious sentiment shall be secured, and no inhabitant of said state shall ever be molested in person or property on account of his or her mode of religious worship. They're taking the Bible out of his hands in Idaho, right before, so they can handcuff him. So, when I think about this, it really, I mean, I've said it hundreds of times, but it really bothers me. It really bothers me that somehow officers who've taken an oath to both this, they've taken an oath to both the U.S. and the state constitution, that somehow they believe in some way that they're justified in arresting pastors in Idaho, stripping the Bible out of their hands so they can handcuff them and take them to jail. Yeah, they were told to do that, but that is not an excuse. They took an oath. They took an oath. And the reason they take an oath is so that they can say, this is what I committed to, not your orders.
Orders are no, you have to be a heartless reptile to follow an order like that.
Okay, I agree. How about this one? Did you know that Idaho was the first state to arrest a mother for taking her children to the park? Sarah Brady. Yep. In Idaho, Meridian, Idaho. And just kind of give you a little bit of information. It's been a couple months since I talked to her. Yeah, she's still fighting. She's still trying to go to court. What happened to the right to speedy trial? Imagine what her life has been like. I know exactly what it's been like. But imagine what her life's been like the last 2 years. She told me the last time I talked to her, and that was a couple months ago, so I'm sure it's a lot higher, but she, at that point, was at $26,000 in legal fees. The state today is still prosecuting her today. Still prosecuting her today.
They want to make an example of it.
Yeah, example for what? That's what's crazy. What? This isn't Idaho, right? This isn't Idaho. What?
The whole coronavirus was politics and not a disease.
Yep. So did you know also that Idaho was one of the first states to raid businesses for not closing down during the lockdown orders?
Sunshine is one of the best medications for the flu, too. That's why.
Sunshine is the best disinfectant, right?
Yes, right.
So you have to ask the question, why are police acting like this? Why are they acting like this? Oops, I lost my... why are they acting like this? Anybody want to answer this?
Just doing their job.
They're doing their job?
They've been
That's announced by the governor.
Okay,
They didn't
So-
lose their job.
well, that is, there's a lot of truth to that,
Yeah.
right? Why are they acting like this? But they're acting like this, we did point out that they were taking orders, right? They were obeying orders. But whose orders? So here's an order to self-isolate. And it says that this order directs all individuals in the state of Idaho to self-isolate at their place of residence. It goes on to say that you have to stay in your home, that if you're declared a non-essential business, you have to close your business. And number 4, prohibiting all non-essential gatherings of any number of individuals, which included church. Right? But I thought that was protected, right? Well, ordering the cessation of all non-essential travel. So the governor's saying that you have to stay in your home, and if you don't, then you're breaking this order. Now you might ask, well, was it enforceable? Well, if you go to page 9, section 9 of the same order, it says the direct request that the sheriff and the chief of police in the state of Idaho and the Idaho State Police ensure compliance with and enforce this order. So what were they doing? They were enforcing the order. Governor Little's stay-at-home order.
They were going against the Constitution right there.
They were.
Yep.
So here's an Idaho State Police that went into a business and they later raided the business and began prosecuting the owners. Listen to what he says.
Would you say that again?
He's an undercover officer.
Handing that letter back.
Now,
I would like to hear him identify himself again.
I'm Jake Schweckman with the Idaho State Police. I'm just delivering this letter in response to you guys opening it, in contrast to the stay-at-home order.
You hear that? In contrast to you staying open, we're here, we're giving you this violation. That's what we're here for. And a few days later, ISP, Idaho State Police, raided the business and began prosecuting the owners because of this man's orders right here. Now we might ask the question, was this done because Governor Little was concerned about the health and safety of the people of Idaho?
I don't think so.
Okay, do you think we could just pretend that was it?
No.
Well, come on now, just try to pretend, right? Okay, well there's some problems with this because at first he was trying to come off like he was doing it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. However, if you remember, go back to March 13th, 2020, that's when he issued his first emergency order, right? And, well, what he did is he put the state of Idaho in emergency status, right? Do you remember that?
We still are.
Well, it just so happened to be,
In January,
so he did, he rescinded on April 15th, and on April 15th, yeah. 2021, or 22, April 15th, 2022. So, let me get through this, yeah, I'm going to get to that. Okay, so March 13th is when he put the state of Idaho in emergency status. Well, it just so happened to be that on March 13th, that President Trump, the same day that President Trump held a press conference, announced that states that were in emergency status, that $50 billion would be available to them, to those states. Okay, on the very same day. Now you might be asking, remember, the health and safety of the people of Idaho, but the problem with that is on the governor's own website, on March 13th, he said that there's only one confirmed COVID case in all of Idaho. But yet he put us under emergency status on the same day that President Trump announced that $50 billion are available for states that were in emergency status. All right? So then, do you remember what he did 12 days later? He put the state of Idaho in an extreme state of emergency. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, and that's when they issued the stay-at-home order. Well, it just so happened to be on March 25th, it was the same day that President Trump and Nancy Pelosi announced that there was going to be $2 trillion available for states that were in extreme state of emergency. Okay? At that time, we had no COVID deaths and 136 unconfirmed COVID cases. Remember, they didn't even know it. They were still calling it coronavirus, and they were saying that they didn't know anything about it. All right, so you can see there that maybe there's some other motives going on here other than just the health and safety of the people of Idaho. So now let's look at this a little closer, because if we look at his orders, he begins to tell us what he's doing. And right here he says, on securing millions of dollars in funds, he talks about, you know, the COVID cases and Trump and money, and then he says, I'm doing this under authority section 46601. Remember that, 46601. Here he's thanking President Trump for the first installment of $1.25 billion, and he's looking for more. Right here he's saying that I issued a proclamation on March 13th declaring a state of emergency. I issued a proclamation on March 25th declaring a state of extreme emergency. Congress has passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19, whereas I anticipate additional congressional action on federal relief packages to states regarding COVID-19 for the money, and there's more money coming. And then he says in this same order, 2020-07, which is the 7th emergency or executive order of 2020, he says, because of all this money that's coming in, now therefore I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of a COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor. So he's going to put this committee, he's going to get this committee, right? And all this money is going to come from the federal government. And he's got this committee that he appoints, and they serve at his pleasure, and they're going to decide what they're going to do with this money. Now, and then he says right here at the very, this is the 3rd page of this order, for the governor, for the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. Now, how are the funds of the state of Idaho supposed to be administered? Who's supposed to administer them? That's right, the legislature. You guys are informed. So he bypassed the legislature. He's taking all this money to his office, the office of the governor. He said it, not me. And he has this little committee of his buddies that serve at his pleasure, and they get to decide where the money goes. Why is the money, the funds of the state of Idaho, to be administered by the legislature? They represent us, right? And there's a bunch of them, and they all have to agree upon it, so that a small group of people don't get to decide and use that money to pad their buddies' pockets or for other corruptions or to waste it or whatever might be the case. And so that this small group of people don't become corrupted in all this money that they're going to be administering. That's why one of the reasons why we have the legislature. And you can see here, he just completely bypassed the laws of Idaho, the Constitution of Idaho, and put it all underneath his power. Now, if you remember that 46601 I was telling you about, where he says he had authority? This is where I'm getting authority to do this? Yes.
Didn't the legislator give him the power to do that?
They did not.
For 30 days only.
Yeah, well, so let me rephrase that, because he held on to that for, I think, 721 days. Now, the legislature, there is statute, and this is actually one of them, that says that the governor can use it, the executive branch, use his power to be able to protect the people if there's like an invasion or something, but he can only hold on to that power for 30 days, right? And then if it's an extreme state of emergency, he can extend it for another 30 days, but that is it. In fact, the laws actually says that if he goes to 90 days, the legislature shall convene. They're demanded by the people to convene and take that power back.
So he never had the power of the purse?
No, he never had the power of the purse. Thank you for that. Never happened. He never had the power of the purse. But look at this. Look at what he did during COVID. And remember, he used this. Remember that it wasn't about the health and safety of the people of Idaho. It pretty much confirmed that. So now he's using these powers, these emergency powers, unwarranted. And in fact, so if you look at this, 46601, this is authority he says. He says, during a period of state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise all police power vested in the state. So what did he do? That's right. Well, it actually is titled Militia and Military Affairs, Martial Law, and Active Duty. He implemented this, and it says that during this period of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise all policing power within the state. That's what he did. So I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form that this is constitutional. I believe this is a statute that is unconstitutional.
Does it say 30 days right in that?
No, it doesn't. Well, not. But if you continue, it goes through and says 30 days. But make no mistake about it. He consolidated all the powers of government under his control. And then he held on to that for 721 days. Okay? I don't know. It was passed decades ago.
The legislature didn't do it.
Yeah. Okay. So, but this is the authority he says he's doing all this stuff under. And during that 721 days, he's saying that our Constitution doesn't protect us, none of that. Go ahead.
Is there a financial ledger on the money that was taken in and where it went?
Only the first 1.25 billion. Okay? So anybody know where we're at right now?
Is there a FOIA request for that or something? They have to have something about that.
Yeah, it's very difficult. We've been trying to request it and chase it down for the last, year and a half.
Yeah,
So he is at $18.7 billion is what he's received from the federal government. Now, I have another report that I have not confirmed that says it's at $19.2 billion. But I know for sure at least $18.7 billion is what he's received. Now, remember, we're asking this question, did he do it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho? Did he do all this? Did he arrest mothers and arrest pastors and all of this for the health and safety of money? Well, let's go and look at when on March 8, 2022, so just fairly recently, he announced that he's going to end the order on April 15th, 2022. But he says some other things in here. Right here, he says, this was on March 8, 2022. He says, the emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. Without the emergency declaration, we would not be able to provide historic tax relief, a step that is more important now as gas prices and inflation soar. Without the emergency declaration, Idaho would not be the state with the strongest economy in the nation. Without the emergency declaration, the state of Idaho would not be able to provide Idahoans with historic tax relief. So, he says right there that the emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars, federal emergency dollars, right? And then that this surplus that he's claiming is not because the economy of Idaho is also great. It's because he collected $19 billion of federal COVID money, and that's what he's using to prop up the state with. And we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Now, just put this in perspective. That is, a fifth of $1 trillion added to our national debt? And Governor Little has the gall to call this a surplus? So, hopefully that answers your question. I don't know if you got one of these checks, or this was a check stub. Did you get any of this? Well, he says the economy of Idaho continues to blow past projections, and we are leading the country in economic prosperity. We achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans for a second year in a row. We are returning your tax dollars so that we can buy your vote. Oh no, that's not what it says. We're returning your tax dollars with record budget surplus. Now, imagine this. During the two most darkest years of Idaho's history, where people were not going to work, they weren't traveling, businesses were shut down, weren't even going to, kids weren't even going to school. And he's claiming that during those 2020 and 2021, the past 2 years, that they were the best financial years Idaho's ever had. Right. Listen to what this expert says. You're right. Listen to what this expert says from the Hill. The impact of the pandemic on the U.S. and global economy was catastrophic. Economist historian Adam Tooze characterized its impact as being the swiftest and most comprehensive contractive of global economic activity ever. So it says it was of all history, of all the recorded history we have, this was the worst hit to the economy during this period of time. Yet Brad Little is claiming that we have historic, or we've blown past all our projections, and we're leading the country in economic prosperity. That's because he received so much FEMA dollars that he can say this. Now, do you want me to really make you mad? In this same press release, he says this, Governor Little's statement. He says, I kept Idaho open, banned vaccine passports, never issued mandates for vaccines or masks. Then he goes on, the emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans, never put Idaho on lockdown, and never allowed for mandates for masks or vaccines. Well, if that was the case, then why is the Idaho police ripping Bibles out of the pastor's hands and arresting them for holding church services in Idaho?
All the immigrants moving into the state don't know about it, so he's telling a new story because they don't know.
It's not, that's certainly part of it, but he must believe the people of Idaho are so stupid that they will believe, that we will believe anything he tells us. That's what he must believe. He must be it's such an insult to our intelligence, what he's doing. I mean, think about this statement and then what Sarah Brady thinks about this. Or these pastors, or these business owners that got shut down. Well, I mean, thousands of people lost their businesses. They'll never open their doors again. They were declared non-essential and they lost their businesses. And now he's saying, oh, it wasn't because of me. I never did that.
Well, he helped them then. So he's going to hand out free money. Help them.
Well, I mean, $300 of tax refund is not going to really help anybody, except convince them to maybe to vote for him. So I just to emphasize again, he did direct the sheriffs and chiefs of police, the state of Idaho and the Idaho State Police, to enforce his order. Now, we started a little late, and so we've been going for a little over an hour now. I think, yeah, well, and I have a few more things to share with you, but I also don't want to cut into our, conversation. You want me to go another maybe 5 minutes and show some of these things? And then let's talk. Let's really, really talk here. Because if you remember, I just read it. Remember this here, how he took all the powers of government unto himself? Well, one of the things that he did when he took this power was he suspended over 127 administrative laws in Idaho. Now, he probably did more, but this is what we have researched. We know so for sure. Now, the real issue I have with these, some of these were legislated, and he just bypassed it, just overrode it. But these laws were, many of them applied to parental rights when the state takes a child into custody. Okay? Now, we were watching this very, very close. And, thanks, Wendy. I should have done that, but she could tell when I'm getting thirsty. Thank you. Yep. So he used his executive power to suspend parental rights when the state takes a child into custody. And you might have to say, why is he doing this? Because that's what we found this out, and we began to ask, why is he doing this? However, right around that same time, an individual from Washington had told me that Governor Inslee was doing something similar in Washington. And so I began to dig into it, and they sent me some evidence, and the reason they knew about it, because the Washington state government made a mistake. And they issued they actually put in a job ad, a government job, for people, for employees, or looking for employees to serve in positions at emergency children's quarantine centers. So this is the job ad right here. We took a screenshot of it. I actually saw it live. It was also on Indeed. And DCYF is the Washington Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And it says DCYF is seeking current employees in King, Snohomish, and Benton counties to volunteers to supervise and support children and youth in emergency quarantine centers. So we caught on to this, and we're like, wait a minute. Because what we saw was Governor Little was following everything Governor Inslee was doing, and so were other governors. Inslee would do it, Governor Little would do it like a week or two later. And so we're like, how are these things related? And then when you get into here, you begin to see, these are the list of, well, let me read this. This is where he made a proclamation saying he's suspending these rights. He says, the appended list of state administrative rules are hereby suspended for the duration of the declared state of emergency in order to ensure these administrative rules do not in any way prevent, hinder, or delay necessary action in coping with the emergency. So we're suspending all these rules because we don't want them to get in the way of what we're doing here. And so here it is. It shows that Brad Little is signing it. That's the same thing I just read. And then here is the list. Now if you look, there's a whole bunch of rules here, laws, that were suspended when it comes to children's housing. For example, I don't know if you could see it. Let me see if I could. No, I can't bring it up in this. But it says, child care licensing, suspension of licensing, so the facility doesn't have to have a license. Employee and volunteer training, so the employee and volunteers that are with these children, they don't have to be trained. Staffing ratios. So all the ratios where you have to have so many adults per children, they threw all those out the door. You don't have to do that anymore. Fire safety requirements for the building. Public health district inspections for the facility. Bathroom facilities. Like where before they had to have so many bathrooms per child, and all of that they threw out the door. Sleeping rooms. They can now just put them in a warehouse and just pack them in there. There's no limit or restrictions or requirement for housing. And even beds. They don't have to even give beds to them anymore. They suspended all these administrative rules. Now, you have to ask, and we did. We asked, why would they do this? What would be the point of this? Anybody have any idea? Because we believe we know, and I've hinted about it. What's that?
He wanted to put him in Walmart warehouse.
Okay, that's right. He made it by suspending these laws where he can house massive amounts of children in a warehouse, facility, wherever, and not have these rules. That is the only conclusion that we could come to after studying all of this. Okay, now, not only that, this is not all, but he actually suspended parental rights, which is the right to visit the child, the right to be notified where your child is at, and the right to appeal if you're not okay with what the state is doing with your child. He suspended those. Why? Because you can't have parents coming and visiting places like that. You can't facilitate that. And you can't have them appealing where they're at, or you can't, you can't be notifying them if you just transfer them to another facility. That's too, there's too much friction in that.
Isn't that child trafficking?
Is this for the future, or is this something?
This is something that he did during his emergency orders. So, okay.
It's not in effect now then?
No. We believe that it went out of effect on April 15th, 2022, so just recently. And I'm showing you this to show you what your governor did.
Well, I didn't. Can't do again, though.
I didn't either. And that's what I was thinking, another pandemic that comes around, he would just slap it back down.
Well, and what if Governor Little wins this election, what does it tell him? No problem. We can have another emergency order. We can do all these things again, and it's no issue. We can do it. The people of Idaho has basically give their approval.
It's to control the parents, because the parents, as now this generation, will not stand up. There needs to be a catalyst. Right now, they're sitting and simmering in water. It's like the old adage, how do you want to kill a frog? Turn up the water very slowly, and it'll never know, and never jump out. And that's what's happening to us.
So, I have not said anything here that I haven't tried to back up. I hope that pretty much everything I've said, I've backed up here with evidence. Because I want you to understand that this isn't an attack on a political opponent. That's not what this is. I would have never run for governor if he had not done these things. But I see now that absolutely we must not allow him to become the governor. So,
Okay, now-
let's talk. Let's
now
talk.
Tell us your path to victory and how we can help.
Okay. Can I reserve that to the very end? Okay, so right here.
Couple things. Can't the legislature or the attorney general, can't they take back their power and reel him in? And I think some people want to hear a little bit about Lava Ridge. And how do you get a fair shake in the newspaper? Because you of all people know that you can't get a fair shake or the truth published in the newspaper.
Okay, so a couple questions there, and then obviously we want to talk about Lava Ridge as well. So raise your hand if you've subscribed to the Idaho Statesman. Raise your hand if you're subscribed to the Idaho Statesman.
Listen, we used
So,
to have 10,000 subscriptions to the Times News here.
Right.
It's 283 now.
So the reason why I do that is because I've done that all over the state of Idaho, and I'm talking about now, it's been a little while since I've done it, but I used to do it every meeting. And all over the state of Idaho. Now to thousands of people I've asked that question. And anybody want to guess how many people have raised their hand? One person. One person. And he says, I just do it to keep an eye on what the liberals are doing. So, yeah, they're going to try to defame me. They're going to try to, and they have, but their influence is actually, weighing. Yeah, it definitely is. And, we can't deny that that is happening. But most of the people, the 13.5 people that are subscribed to the Idaho Statement is not going to vote for me anyway. And so I'm not going to pander and try to please them and get them to like me. It's just not. So anyway, there's that. What was the first question you asked?
Can't the Attorney General or the legislature say, no, we're
Okay.
taking back our power, you can go to...
They actually absolutely could, and oh man, how do I even get going? But they're so weak right now. They're so weak. And in fact, we finally got them, a small group of them, to implement this law on the 90-day. Remember, they were supposed to convene on the 90-day? So they came on the 90th day. There was like 17 of them. But they didn't have enough to make a quorum. And then also, the governor and the attorney general said that the legislature didn't have the authority to convene without the governor's permission. Do you remember that? So here you've got the executive branch telling the legislative branch that they can't convene to end the power of the executive branch. And guess what most of the legislatures did? Oh, okay, and they went home. Okay, if the governor says we can't do this, they went home. Like whatever, I learned checks and balances in high school, and I went to public school in Virgin Valley High School. So, anyway, hopefully that answered your question. Right here.
I wanted to add one thing to the emergency order.
Okay.
And in that extreme emergency order, he banned the prescription hydroxychloroquine.
He was the first governor of all 50 states.
And so all the doctors, and I know, didn't stand up for their own.
That's correct.
Stayed with it.
So,
I didn't know he practiced medicine too.
yeah. So, the crazy thing you're right, and the crazy thing about this is he outlawed the use of hydroxychloroquine, one of the established medicines that most effective medicines for COVID-19, right? So he outlawed it on March 19th, 2020.
Yep.
Think about, March 19th. They were still calling it the novel coronavirus back then. They were saying they didn't know anything about it. Yeah, you got Governor Little, the first governor of all 50 states, to outlaw the use of hydroxychloroquine on March 19th, 2020.
He's gotta be getting money.
Okay. All right, right here.
So where do you stand? So where do you, I've got a big voice, I taught school a lot of years. So where do you stand now with St. Luke's and the Baby Cyrus incident?
So,
You were supposed to be somewhere today, weren't you?
oh, I don't know. I don't pay attention to those kind of things. So I may have, but some of you may know that the city of Meridian took a little baby from loving parents who were doing all they could for that baby's health, and unlawfully took him, and they did it under the direction and order of a doctor from St. Luke's. And so anyway, make a very long story short, I got involved. I knew the family. I was friends with the family, very close friends with the family actually, and we ended up, putting so much pressure on them that we got the baby back, and we also got them to abandon the case and get rid of the case and those things. However, in the process, St. Luke's trespassed me and had me arrested for being on their property, and so I'm being prosecuted for that. And then also, after that, St. Luke's sued me and sued the grandfather as well. And and I just pretty much ignored that case. It's a major distraction, and they'll end up probably getting a default judgment, but I just can't let it distract me. And so that's where we're at. So that's where we're at right here.
So if you could address the Lava Ridge thing, I know several people, that's why we came.
Sure. So it's your community, so you ask me a question, like so as governor, what will I do to stop it? So I want to not back up, but I want to show you something here. Because did you know that 61% of Idaho's land is controlled by the federal government? 61%. It's actually 63, but when you take out reservations and the military bases, it's 61% is unconstitutionally controlled by the federal government. And I get it, it wasn't just our generation, right? But we have allowed them to do this. We have allowed them to take this land, to basically claim that it's theirs. It's extremely unconstitutional, and it's causing major problems in Idaho, including this whole Lava Ridge incident, and all the waste and, everything that goes along with it. And I'm as much putting this up on myself as anybody else, but what did we think was going to happen? We allowed an unconstitutional entity well, I wouldn't say they're unconstitutional, but this act is unconstitutional, to come in and control over 61% of our land and 72% of our subsurface mineral rights and claim that it's theirs, and then now we're upset that they decide on their property that they're going to build, wind farms and make money off of it. And now we're going, wait a minute, now that it's affecting us, we have a major problem with it. Well, I could tell you that in the area that my father was ranching, when I was growing up, there was 53 ranchers. And my dad is the only one left. And when I was a little kid, the ranchers were pleading, begging people to help them, to stand with them, to see what is happening. And no one would stand with them. They're just complaining about something that, doesn't affect us. And so now what is happening right here with the wind farms is what happened to the ranchers, the loggers, the miners, and many other industries. And I know that's not the answer, but that's not a very good answer, but I'm wanting to bring the reality to the table here, what's really happening. We allowed this, and we've now allowed it to go on for almost 100 years. And really, really heavily since the early 80s, mid 70s is where it really became prevalent. And so what do? Well, we are in such a mess, it's going to be very, very difficult. But we have to fight to get our lands back. We must. We must. But it shouldn't be a little family in the desert trying to fight the federal government, the most powerful government ever known in the history of man, with the most powerful legal team, with the most resources ever known to any legal team in the history of, written history of mankind. It shouldn't be that entity against the little ranching family in the middle of the desert barely making a living. It should be the state. The state. It should have been the state of Nevada versus the U.S. government when they came after us. And it should be the state of Idaho v. the U.S. government. That's how these fights are supposed to be fought. And as governor, that's how I will fight these fights. It will not be, individual trying to preserve his farm or his ranch or his mine or his logging operation. It'll be the state of Idaho fighting these battles. And I believe that if that was the case, we have a chance of winning. We have a chance of going to, the Supreme Court. We have a chance of winning and getting our lands and resources back. I do believe that. So, hold on to those thoughts, okay?
That's what you were saying, though. In the year 2000, I was taking accounting classes, and they taught us then that the federal government was, whoever our governor was giving away 51%, and we only had 49% of the state river, where we used to have more, But your federal government has been encroaching on all of our natural resources over decades. This is back in 2000,
Yeah.
2000.
And that's a water source.
And that was the state river, yeah.
Okay, let's get some other comments.
Okay, so let me emphasize this. This federal control of our lands is causing 4 major problems, and the wind farm is included in this. But one is it's causing our affordable housing crisis. And you think, well, what do you mean by that? Well, the white right here is the private property, and the red is federally controlled. And we're landlocked. We're landlocked, and we're also not allowed to benefit from all the natural resources in the red there. So, like I got a friend in Bonners Ferry. Anybody been to Bonners Ferry? Like heavily wooded, it's a beautiful place, trees everywhere, beautiful forests. And he buys lumber at the local hardware, pays 3 or 4 times of what it should be, and it come out of Canada. Why? Because they won't let them harvest the forest around them. It just burns up. And so our building supplies are really high, and we're landlocked, so our land prices are really high. And the next generation is facing the reality of not being able to own a home. That is a reality. I have a 20-year-old daughter who's pregnant. She is married. She did it right. They're going to school. They're not looking for a house right now, but they will be soon. And right now, they're facing the reality with the wages versus the cost of housing of never owning a home or a piece of land in Idaho. So they're going to have to go out to the Midwest to be able to afford them a house or live in somebody else's house. We won't. How do we preserve freedom for the next generation if we don't have housing that's available and affordable for them? So there's that. Two is we're destroying our number one industry in Idaho. What's the number one industry in Idaho? Agriculture. Well, where are we building our houses? On the farm ground. We're destroying our number one industry. Why can't we build on these hills and these areas that are perfect for development around these towns instead of destroying our agriculture? Because we're landlocked. Another thing that's happening, and I'll show you a diagram here, is, let's see, it's right here, is this is where we get it. This is the state's own graph. This is where we get our money. And so 36.4% of our money is coming from the federal government. We can't even pay our own bills. Why can't we pay our own bills? Because we can't mine, log, we can't develop other resources. We can't use 61% of our land. Imagine having $1 million in the bank, but 610,000 of it you can never use. And that's a pretty, that's not even the greatest analogy, but that's basically what's happening. So we have to go to the federal government every year, and over a third of our budget comes from them, and guess what? Not $1 comes without strings attached to it. And then we cry and moan and say, why do we have Common Core in our schools? Well, that's because the school district took federal money and they signed an agreement. Why do we have critical race theory? You know, why do we have the use of force, the federal use of force policies in our policing agencies? Why are our counties following UN-type building codes? Because we took money from the federal government and they required us to follow these mandates, these requirements. So it is destroying our independence. And then the last thing, and then I'll jump off this and answer more questions, is we are losing our conservative identity because our young people cannot live in these small towns because the resources are so limited that they have to go to the cities. And when they do that, and when we build up our cities rather than build out, then we lose our conservative identity, and they begin to control us politically and everything else, and it's not a conservative platform or belief that they lose that. So that's what is being caused because of federal land control, along with all these other things. These, solar farms. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The mining. Oh man, I've got to get off this and answer questions, but cobalt, number one, we have the largest cobalt deposits in Idaho, or in the United States, largest cobalt deposits in the United States. The federal government leases it out to a mining company. The mining company makes profit, the federal government makes profit, and the people make almost nothing. Go back to the federal government, hey, can we have a little bit of that? And they say, yeah, in your schools. Where are we at? Go ahead, right there.
On the federal land, what do you think?
Get this done. We do want to preserve, our hunting, hiking, fishing, and all of that lands. but we do what we call it multiple use lands. And some of you, older people in here might know what multiple use is, and that's where the hunters, hikers, fishers, campers, and all that are enjoying this land like we have, but also on the same land in the same area, they're logging, they're mining, they're ranching, and those of you who hunt know that most of your roads were made by loggers. This was the way that the West was developed as under multiple use, and that's the way I think we need to go back to that. So, yeah, thank you. All right, right here.
I have a question in a similar vein to what we were talking about earlier with the state protecting the rights of the individuals within the state. And my apologies for posing a hypothetical, but it's, a lot of the people in here that love their Second Amendment rights would probably be interested to know what you would do. But let's just say if you are elected governor and the federal government decides they're going to mess around and find out with our Second Amendment, and you get the order from the president, from the office of the president himself, or from the head of the ATF that, hey, the federal government's going to start going door to door in your state and surrounding states, and we would just like either your cooperation or you to stand down. What are you going to do?
So just that's already happening, by the way. It's just happening in an isolated cases, right? And so one thing that has to be made clear, and the governor should make this clear, is that the law enforcement agencies, the federal law enforcement agencies, do not have authority to come into Idaho and to enforce federal law without consent of their local sheriff. They do not. The sheriff is the highest policing officer in the county, higher than the federal and so forth, and the sheriffs, as governor, will know there'll be a asserted effort to communicate with and to work with the sheriffs to know that the state and the Attorney General's office has their back in stopping anybody who comes in and tries to enforce unconstitutional laws. Red flag laws, pandemic mandates, doesn't matter what it is. And so that is the proper way to do it. It should be the sheriff doing it. But the sheriff should have the confidence and the backing of the governor. And the governor should be very vocal about not allowing those things to happen in the state. So that, and the resources, what resources does the governor have if the county sheriff needs a little bit of help? What's that? Yeah, the National Guard. Right? Now, I would hope that it would never get to that. And I'm glad none of you said Idaho State Police. Right? But those are really important things because the state is supposed to check and balance the federal government. And it's not happening. And it is extremely important that that starts to happen because it's so that we can prevent armed conflict, not so that we create it. Because if we don't stop things such as, the federal government coming in and mandating, whatever it might be, vaccines, masks, or red flag laws or whatever, we don't stop that, the federal government will get the message that they can do whatever they want, anywhere they want. And that's one of the reasons why Idaho needs to do this and set this example. They need to set this example for the rest of the states. The rest of the states will follow. Okay. I heard some things about that. I don't really know the details. So, okay, so we're getting close. You cut me off whenever we're ready to end, or whenever you think we need to get out of here, because it is.
Well, we go for another 10 minutes because we could be here all night.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go right here because you had, and then right here, and then right here. Go ahead.
So how do you cut back using the federal funds? How can you do that? How do you wean off that?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. How do you wean yourself off of this? That's a lot of money. That's, really when it comes, and this is just the state. Now you got your school districts, you got, your counties, you got your cities. They're all taking federal funds, and this is just the state. So how do we wean ourselves from this? We must wean ourselves from this, by the way. But let me show you how it's spent. Did you know that almost 40% of the state budget is spent on welfare?
Yeah, we need to get rid of that. Yeah, we do.
So do you see a similarity there? 36.4, 39.7. We have the ability to become independent.
So if you get rid of that 40% of welfare, that means that some of the people are going to have to go back to work.
Or say, oh, not a bad idea, right? Or listen to what happens. I get this all the time. Think of the benefit of this. They have to go back to work, or they leave Idaho. Now, also, if you were to get this down to almost nothing, right? It would send a message to all of the world, but also to Washington, Oregon, and California. Don't come to Idaho, they don't give you anything. And those who are pushing the leftist agenda in Idaho are living off of this.
Yes, they are.
They are, in one form or another, they're living off of this. We solve so many of our problems by eliminating the majority of this. So many of our, and pushing it back on to families, back onto churches, back onto communities to help.
It's 40% of the voting base, though. I mean, how do we go about that?
We've got to get active. Otherwise we lose our state. You cannot have this and to have people. We're talking about $3.7 billion a year. That's just what the state is spending on welfare. It's the largest chunk of our spending. The next is education. So hopefully, there's several ways. There's several things that we have to do, but that's just kind of cut and dry a little bit there. One way. Another thing is if we get back control of our lands and resources, we'll have a tremendous amount of wealth that comes with that, and now we can start paying our own bills. And none of these, don't get me wrong, none of these battles are easy. These are tremendous battles, but if we don't fight them, and we don't fight them now, we will become completely dependent on the federal government, and we will not be able to act. Because in this life, you're either acted upon or you're acting. You're either acting or you're acted upon. We have a decision right now. Are we going to be people that act, or are we going to be people that are acted upon? Okay, right here, and then right here, and then if we have enough time, we'll go here. So go ahead.
So, Governor Little took a lot of money during the COVID-19. Is there a paper trail for that money and what it was spent on?
So
who has it?
The controller, Idaho controller, broke down the first installment of $1.25 billion. And from then on, we can get big chunks. We can see big chunks of like where it was dedicated for big chunks, but we cannot seem to get like where everything went to.
So it could be lining somebody's pocket.
Well, yeah, especially, let's look at what he's doing right now. He's pushing $400 million right now to the education department, but there's. I don't know if there's anything left, or if it's just, if he's already spent it all. I really don't know. So that's the best I could tell you. Right back here.
I've been biting my tongue a lot of time while you've been talking, so I hope you'll give me a few minutes. One thing I've noticed in Burley is that I think a lot of the reason it is such a red county is because we don't have rental property. And you can tell that political activists are moving in because they need rental property because they're not going to stay here. Also, I think a lot of bribes go to, a lot of the spending that they were just now talking about, I think it goes for payback and commission because otherwise there's no profit for politicians in making everybody else make money. I think too that some people served as test cases for the shutdown. I know at least one person who isolated for 2 years before it was spread and everybody else was isolating. That person is now isolating, has now been ostracized from the internet. So I think there's a lot of things going on that we're not aware of. Also, my children have been, I really feel like they've been confiscated, and it's really ironic that they now support things like abortion, where if I had done that, they wouldn't be here. Our children are being confiscated by people who do not have their best interests at heart.
Are you talking about the education department or our public schools?
Actually, I think it's the internet that
Okay, internet, certainly part of the education. Okay, so
determining their thoughts and their views. Give me just another minute or two.
I'll give you 1 more minute.
I really appreciate it.
Do you have a question?
I wrote a book that's been suppressed by bureaucracy about how to solve poverty. Also, I think a lot of these things that are going on that you're talking about, I think that they are trying to get us to believe that the human population needs to be reduced.
Yeah. So, and what is the states shouldn't, I mean, there have been always very wicked people that have plans that are very wicked, right? That's why we created states. That's why we actually created the federal government. That's why we create counties. These were supposed to be the entities that where the people's power is held to secure rights. But that's not what's happening, you know, completely. And that's why we have to get our state back to protecting our rights. So one more question. I gotta cut this off somewhere right here.
I was just trying to figure out a way to raise our PILT rate without affecting everyone.
We don't want to raise our PILT rate.
I mean, to like get more PILT from government.
Yeah.
Without raising our taxes.
No, we got to take back our lands. Anybody know what PILT is? Payment in lieu of taxes. It's where the federal government pays us like 1% of a little bit of our taxes that they would normally make off that land. And, you know, they did it because the states were like, look, you're controlling 61% of our land. We can't, it's not untaxable to us. We can't pay our own bills. So they said, well, we'll create something called PILT, payment in lieu of taxes. We'll give you a little bit of money to satisfy you. So we're not talking about, we can't deal with the federal government taking and controlling our lands. We have to take back our lands. You know, just to get them to raise the PILT, you know, another % or 2 is not going to solve our problems.
Well, I understand that, but I also understand that BLM was never meant to be the monster that it is now.
No,
It was
none of the
meant
bureaucracies were.
It was created to administer and manage lands that were not really usable or that we hadn't, they're not productive or whatever. And they were to manage those correctly, and that has not happened.
So they weren't to manage it all. What they were doing, they were created out of the land office and the grazing board to encourage the people to use the land. That's what they were created for. No, the people were supposed to manage the resources and use the resources. They were to encourage the people to come out and to use it. And they have now taken over and become completely opposite of what they were created for. Yeah. So right behind you, you had a question, but make it quick if you can.
It wasn't a question. I still want to know about the lab of wind rigs thing. That's why I came.
So did I not? I thought I answered that question. How? So I'm glad you brought it up again if you're still concerned about it. What are you going to do about it right now? What are you going to be able to do about it now?
What can we do? How do you stop that?
Said they're not going to accept it or let it happen.
And the federal government will say, well, it's our land. We're going to do whatever we want with it.
It's not
We have allowed them to claim land that is not theirs. And until we fight that battle, that the land does not belong to them, they will continue to take and more. They will continue to take. Well, so we have, listen, we have a really good Attorney General that's probably going to take office as well. And if that's a combination, what's that? Labrador. So the reason why I say, anyway, I could get into a lot of detail, but this has to be fought, I believe, by the state fighting the federal government in a legal battle that will probably go all the way to the Supreme Court. And I believe that our Supreme Court right now will rule towards the state. And I think Roe versus Wade proves that. So now, do you stop fighting locally? I don't know, but what are you going to go down to the BLM office and beg them to not put in the solar farms because you don't like the lights at night? They don't give a damn. Because they believe it's theirs. And I'm not trying to be in any way rude. This is the reality. I've seen them decimate entire industries because of a spotted owl or a desert tortoise, which really wasn't the excuse. It was a design to destroy that industry. So,
people don't know, if you're a citizen of the state, you own the land. That's the way the Constitution says.
so I'm getting, yep, thank you very much, thank you. So I have really enjoyed this conversation. I would have loved to continue, but we could, like you said, we could go on all night, we really could. And maybe I didn't satisfy what you were hoping you were going to get out of me when it comes to the Lava Ridge, but I've been honest with you. I've been honest with you, and I've told you what I believe it's going to take to win that battle. Now, I wanted to just go over, because we've defined the 8 planks of the Keep Idaho, Idaho plan. And I want to just quickly go through these and then wrap this up. 1, protect private property. 2, eliminate progressive taxes, including property tax. 3, free Idaho from federal control. 4, make Idaho independent again. 5, bring back the rule of law. 6, make Idaho an economic powerhouse. 7, secure the quality of life for every Idaho family. And 8, make Idaho an example of peace and prosperity to the rest of the world. And boy, do we need it. Boy, do we need an example. And I believe that we can accomplish this here in Idaho. So that I have to end on that. I told you I was going to leave that to the very end. Yeah. Oh, I'm in it? Yeah, sorry. So, how do you help?
You got to keep moving, cowboy.
Yeah. Oh, you. I can see how important I am here. So, how do you help me? So there's 3 things that we need right now. One is I'm asking you to go to votebundy.com and subscribe to my emails, to get emails and text messages if you want to leave your phone number. We won't abuse it, but it's extremely important that I can send you emails and communicate with you. I'll send you videos, I'll send you documents, I'll send you, articles, and to keep you informed of what's happening, what's going on. Because the first line of defense is communication, right? And if I can't communicate with you, or if we can't communicate, then it's very difficult for us to unite. So subscribe to votebundy.com. Then, when I send you a good video or I send you a good article, I need you to be brave enough to send it on to your friends and family and contacts in Idaho. Now, that's a scary thing, right? And I also need you to have the conversations with your friends at work or wherever you're at church, wherever you're at, because we have to overcome this, stigma that those that really hate America have put on me and many others that are like me. And we've got about 60 days to do it before November. And we've broke through many walls. So it's not like, we're losing in this battle. But can we get enough of it done to go to win an election, a statewide election? Well, that depends on all of you. It really does. Now, if you want to have a good conversation with your neighbors, there's one thing, very easy thing you could do. And that is put a Bundy for Governor yard sign in your front yard. That's right. So make sure you get one before you leave and be brave enough to put it in your front yard. There's thousands of them all over Idaho. Thousands of them. So you're not alone. And then what?
Put those on public, like in a park?
You can now because we're within 60 days. Now, certain public places, they're just going to remove them. But if you have them on intersections and you have...
Oakley Public Park.
I don't know about parks. I don't know. Some maybe, yeah. There's different cities and have different ordinances. But as far as intersections and so forth, you put them on there. But you want it in your front yard. Nothing means more than in your front yard. And the conversations that you're going to have are going to be because it's in your front yard. That's all right. You still get visitors. You get. Okay, now that was number 2. Now number 3 is also important. I need you to donate. I need you to donate. You go to votebundy.com. I can't tell you the amount of things that we could do if we had the money to do it. I mean, just kind of give you an idea. One video, just the shooting and editing of a video costs anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. No. For one good quality video. Wow. And then that's not even publishing it. That's not even publishing it. Then now you got to publish it, which could cost tens of thousands of dollars just to get it into a forum where people actually see it.
Is this here
so
being video?
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So if you make them available, then we can
We do. If you go to Vote Bundy, you go to news, or you go to events. You can go to the town halls and you can click on them, and this information is available there. So these meetings are available there. All right. So that's what I need you to do. Very practical things. I need you to subscribe. Need you to be willing to pass the information on. Put yard signs, battle for me out there, and I need you just to donate. And I will tell you this. I haven't even got into it, and I'm going to wrap up here in like 2 minutes or less. Because
Don't make me time yet.
please don't. I don't want to get to that. Although you've been patient, so thank you. We are winning this battle. We are winning this battle. It's amazing what has happened in this last year and a half. And I'm an unaffiliated candidate. I was a Republican. I pulled out. You might have done some of that was a fun thing that happened, right? So I pulled out. But what happened? Half the Republican Party followed me. And that's what is happening right now. So we have these really good demographics. We believe pretty close to half the Republican Party is going to vote for us. We have the unaffiliated group, which is almost 310,000 people in Idaho, that we should do very well in. The Constitutional Party, the Libertarian Party, we should do very well in as well. And we may even get some actual, can I say this, conservative Democrats that are going to vote for us. Okay? So we are winning this battle. It's amazing what's happening, but I need your help. I need you to really fight in this area. If we have time, we'll come back here again too. But go out and battle. Do what we got to do. Let's keep Idaho, Idaho. Let's implement these things in Idaho. Thank you for your time.
I really want to thank Mr. Bundy for coming. That was great. Anybody want to offer a closing prayer? Thank you.